And before we do the user around the room, I'm just going to do a very brief market update. Here's some of the research areas that IDC is researching this year. So if any of these topics are of interest to you, let us know and we'll share the information with you. We're looking, of course, as much more detailed as what the industrial sector is doing, the emergence of big data. We've also created a new low-end tracking model, and for those of us that can join us on Thursday, we're going to be kind of sharing with you the initial results of that and the process and procedures we're using. We have a disruptive technology panel tomorrow where we're trying to really dig more deeply into the new technologies that could really reshape the industry. And the other area, we think, Department of Energy for a research grant on the ROI within HPC. We'll be talking about that in detail tomorrow. We're also just created a new service, and that's under high performance data analysis, and that's really our version of where big data meets HPC. And Steve Conway and Chirag Dekate tomorrow will be walking through our research in that area and what we're planning to do. And as I mentioned on Thursday, we are looking at redefining and expanding the way we track the market, how we define the market. I think most of you realize that the supercomputer segment's been growing like crazy, and 7 years ago it was actually shrinking away, so we redefined what a supercomputer was and we called it anything more than $500,000. Right now that's now more than half the whole market of HPC. So we view right now as maybe it's time to redefine the supercomputers, and we don't know what the answers are, but on Thursday we plan to figure out what the answers are there. Plus in these other areas on clouds, big data, accelerators, the missing middle. The interesting part on clouds is we've been spending the last few years to try to find as many examples of HPC clouds, and there aren't a whole lot of what I call large-scale usage, but in this research that we're just finishing right now, it looks like 20% of the sites in HPC are at least using the cloud in some way. And we're trying to figure out what's the right way to track that. In other words, do we track the servers that were sold that went into a cloud that might be used someday? Or do we track people actually spending money when they go to the cloud? So those are some of the topics we'll be working through. So then to the numbers. So 2012 was another strong year, $11 billion, so it makes it the high point of the industry again. Q3 2012 was the largest quarter ever in HPC by quite a substantial amount. A lot of that was driven by the Recon system being accepted, which was $500 million, plus IBM had some very large installs. And of course, you're familiar with most of these other points here. So here's how the market actually turned out as far as supercomputers, divisional, departmental, work group. Work groups are servers that sell for less than 100,000. Departmental is 100,000 to 250. Divisional is 250 to 500. And as I mentioned before, supercomputers are anything over 500,000. And you can see that's why it's now about half the market. At the same time, we're expecting that the lower part of the market, because it was mostly hit by the recession, you can see the kind of recession impact on those segments, most likely will be the first to recover as the economies get more stable. And some initial surveys we've been doing are showing that this looks like it's going to see at least a 5 to 10% growth rate in 2013. So we've seen that recovery starting to come back now. Here's the same chart, but showing the actual units. So as far as the number of servers sold in HPC, you know, it's running right now around 100,000. You can notice here that the actual numbers have gone down as far as the number of systems. The reason for that is we're selling a lot more large systems as opposed to a lot of small systems. Here's how it splits out by the different regions of the world over the last 5 years. You can see the US still represents just shy of half the market, you know, around 45%. Europe has grown fairly well. You know, Europe made some very significant changes over the last 2.5 years. And of course you can see China's impact here. The amazing one to me is Japan. You can see has bounced around quite a bit. The Recon system is roughly equal to the entire Japan market in 2008. So you see one system coming in that doubles the country, and of course next year they won't have that same system. Here's how it splits out by vendors over the last 5 years. You can see that HP and IBM have been virtually tied. You know, one of them might be a couple percent larger in a year, a couple percent either way. And then Dell's the number 3 vendor, roughly on the order of half the size of HP and IBM sales. And then everyone else kind of falls in this category of between 50 million to about 400 million-ish a year. You can see some very significant swings there. For example, the Cray number is a little lower here because the new Oak Ridge system actually shows up this year as opposed to 2012. So, you know, for companies like Cray and SGI, if they get an extra 1 or 2 large systems in one year, their numbers are going to go way through the ceiling. And if they're short 1 or 2 systems, their numbers are going to swing way down also. So we expect to see some large swings there. We thought that would be interesting to then kind of take more of a historical perspective. You know, our data structure goes back about 30 years now, but we figured we'd do a snapshot of 17 years because we restated all the historic ones using the new definitions. So this is really how the market has evolved over time, and you can see the 2 major recessions here hitting the market, but it's been fairly steady growth. And this is very unlike what I call the commercial or non-HPC server market, which has kind of had a much, you know, almost leveling or 3-4% type underlying growth going on there. And here's then our forecast. So it's the same 17 years plus 5 years of forecast. And then we're always asked, okay, so everything I talked about so far were just the servers. So what's going on with storage, software, middleware, and services? And so here's our forecast as far as what the overall market will look like. We're expecting by 2016 to be around 15 billion, 14.5 billion on the server side. The storage is growing at a higher rate, between 1 to 2% faster. And then you can see also the middleware, application software, and the repair services. So we expect the market to hit around 30 billion in total by 2016.